Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. We all desire to accomplish great things with our lives. And as followers of Christ, we hope to make an impact on the world through the way we live our lives. David, the newly crowned king of Israel, was no different. He wanted to leave his mark on the nation and do whatever he could to make the name of God great. And in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 through 17, David reveals his plans to build a great edifice in which the Ark of the Covenant could be kept and the glory of God could dwell. But God had other plans. He had not asked David to build him a house. In fact, God let David know that he didn't need one. But he did promise to make David a great house. And he wasn't talking about a palace. God was referring to David's legacy. He would provide David an heir to his throne who would establish the Davidic dynasty forever. This covenant promise, partially fulfilled in Solomon, would be fully fulfilled in Jesus Christ. God was going to do for David and through David great things. When David said, "I will," God said, "No, you won't, but I will." There is some debate as to the chronological order of chapter 7. The natural assumption is that chapter 7 follows chapter 6 in terms of timing. But there are some problems with that assumption. First of all, the chapter starts out with the words, "Now when the king lived in his house, and the Lord had given him rest from all his surrounding enemies." 2 Samuel 7, verse 1. God had given David a period of national peace. But then chapter 8 opens up with the words, "After this, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them." 2 Samuel 7, verse 1. There are those who believe that the term rest simply means that David was experiencing a lull in the fighting. But others believe that chapter 8 covers a time in David's reign when he had completed the task originally given to Joshua and had subdued all the enemies of Israel in the land of Canaan. This would mean that chapter 7 is not in chronological order, but is placed where it is because of its mention of David's desire to build a house for God. In chapter 6, David had placed the Ark of the Covenant in a tent that he had pitched for it. So it would seem that throughout his entire reign, the ark had remained in that same spot, until David came up with the idea to build a temple in which to house it. Chapter 7 appears where it does, not because it fits in chronologically, but because it lays an important framework for the rest of 2 Samuel. It helps explain the future reign of Solomon and provides a foundation for understanding why God remains committed to the kingdom of Israel, in spite of the fact that the majority of their kings failed to remain faithful to God. The covenant outlined in this chapter, known as the Davidic covenant, was actually a type of treaty, commonly referred to as a grant treaty. In this type of treaty, the sovereign makes a commitment to his servant, and it was typically unconditional. God the king is making a promise or covenant with his servant David, and it's not based on David's actions or him holding up his end of the bargain. It's a unilateral covenant, not a bilateral covenant. God is promising to do something for David that has no basis on David's obedience or faithfulness. If you look at the words God speaks to David, 10 different times he says, "I will." "I will make for you a great name," verse 9. "I will appoint a place for my people Israel and will plant them," verse 10. "I will give you rest from all your enemies," verse 11. "The Lord will make you a house," verse 11. "I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom," verse 12. "I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever," verse 13. "I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son," verse 14. "When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men," verse 14. "My steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul," verse 15. This covenant is dependent upon God, not David. It's a picture of the faithfulness and love of God, not the worthiness and obedience of David. And God was not making this covenant with David because he had somehow deserved or earned it. Even David's desire to build a house for God was rejected by God. He hadn't asked David to build him a temple. He didn't need one. In fact, God promises to make David a house. "Moreover, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house." 2 Samuel 7, verse 11. But he wasn't talking about a brick-and-mortar house. God was promising to give David an everlasting legacy that would last long after his own death. David's son Solomon would follow him as king, and his reign would be marked by unprecedented peace and prosperity. Solomon would be the one to build a magnificent temple for God. But Solomon's great reign would not end well. He would prove disobedient to God, having married hundreds of foreign wives and worshiping their gods. As a result, God would split the kingdom in half. And while descendants of David would continue to rule over Judah from his throne in Jerusalem, another line of kings would reign over the northern kingdom of Israel. And then the time would come when both kingdoms would end up in captivity, the result of their stubborn disobedience and unfaithfulness. And from that point forward, no kings would rule over Israel or Judah. To this day, there is no king over Israel. But that's what makes this covenant so significant. What did God mean when he told David, "And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever"? There is no throne in Jerusalem, and even if there was, there is no king to sit on that throne. But there is. There is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who will one day return and reclaim the throne of David. Hundreds of years after this period of David's life, the angel would tell the Virgin Mary, "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be very great, and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end." Luke 1, verses 31 through 33. The prophet Isaiah foretold of the coming of this king when he wrote, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity." Isaiah 9, verses 6 through 7. Daniel also told of a kingdom to come. The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness, and it will stand forever. Daniel 2, verse 44. The Apostle John, in the vision given to him while exiled on the island of Patmos, saw this coming king in all his glory. "And I saw a throne in heaven and someone sitting on it. The one sitting on the throne was as brilliant as gemstones, like jasper and carnelian, and the glow of an emerald encircled his throne like a rainbow. 24 thrones surrounded him, and 24 elders sat on them. They were all clothed in white and had gold crowns on their heads. The 24 elders fall down and worship the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever. And they lay their crowns before the throne and say, 'You are worthy, O Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and they exist because you created what you pleased.'" Revelation 4, verses 2 through 4 and 10 through 11. Chapter 7 is a watershed point in the story of the life of David. What God is letting David know is that his kingdom will be far greater and far more impactful than anything he could ever imagine. God's plans for David go far beyond his reign or that of his son. And while the descendants of David will prove unfaithful and unreliable, God will remain committed to his covenant and faithful to fulfill what he has promised. The Apostle John concludes his great book of Revelation with the stirring image of Christ's reign on the throne of David. "And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away.'" Revelation 21, verses 2 through 4.